The world's most followed TikToker, who is also a UNICEF ambassador and a Hugo Boss partner, got detained by ICE at a Las Vegas airport for overstaying his visa. And the scariest part for him, he almost destroyed his entire ability to work in the United States over what amounts to bad calendar management. I'm Brad with Evolution Expats, and today we're looking at 3 celebrity immigration disasters: a TikToker, a tennis player, and a comedian that prove something most people don't want to hear. No amount of fame, money, or followers protects you from immigration enforcement. But here's where it gets interesting. I'm also going to show you the one thing that did protect one of these celebrities, and it's something that many of you watching might already qualify for. If you're thinking about international mobility, second residency, or citizenship, hit subscribe. Immigration laws change constantly, and I break them down so you don't get blindsided. And leave a like so that the content I make for you actually gets sent to you. So let's start with the story everyone's talking about. Khaby Lame, and yes, that's how his name is pronounced. 25 years old, born in Senegal, raised in Italy since he was 1 year old. You probably know him from those silent reaction videos where he stares at the camera after someone overcomplicates a simple task. That face made him the most followed person on TikTok, more than Charlie D'Amelio, whoever that is, more than anyone. He's also a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador. He has a multi-year deal with Hugo Boss. And in 2022, Italy granted him citizenship based on his lifetime of residency. Using that passport, he entered the United States on April 30th of 2025 under the Visa Waiver program, up to 90 days visa-free for tourism or business. That up to does not mean guaranteed, an important distinction to make. Passport control officers decide your exact authorized stay based on what you tell them. It's one of the reasons why they ask you the purpose of your visit. If he said he was just coming for the Met Gala and a quick trip, they might have stamped him in for only 30 days instead of the full 90 he was eligible for with an Italian passport. Therefore, on June 6th, just 37 days later, ICE detained him at the airport in Las Vegas for overstaying those terms. Now, he got lucky with voluntary departure, but it shows the up to isn't an automatic guarantee. One wrong assumption and you're in hot water. Now, here's where I need to be direct with you, because I think some people are going to watch this and say, well, it worked out fine for him. It did not work out fine. He got incredibly lucky. Khaby was granted something called voluntary departure. This is a specific legal status that allows someone to leave the country without a formal deportation order on their record. It's discretionary, meaning immigration officials don't have to grant it. They can choose to at their sole discretion. If he had been formally deported instead of granted voluntary departure, Khaby Lame would likely be facing a 10-year ban from re-entering the United States. Think about what that would mean for someone at his level. No more Met Galas, no more brand deals that require a US presence, no more collaborations with American creators, no more award shows, no more Super Bowl commercials. A decade locked out of the world's largest entertainment market because he couldn't be bothered to check the calendar. Now, we're going to talk later about why Khaby probably received the outcome that he did, and it has absolutely everything to do with which passport he was holding. But first, let me be absolutely clear about something. This kind of risky behavior is never worth it. I don't care if you're the most famous person on the internet or a complete unknown. Overstaying your visa is playing Russian roulette with your future mobility. The upside is, what, a few extra weeks somewhere? The downside is potentially permanent consequences that will follow you for the rest of your life. There's a version of this story where Khaby Lame is telling his grandchildren why he can never take them to Disneyland. Don't be that person. But Khaby isn't the only global celebrity that discovered that fame doesn't equal immunity. Let's go to Melbourne, Australia, January of 2022. Novak Djokovic, at the time arguably the greatest tennis player who has ever lived, the world number 1, a 9-time Australian Open champion. He was seeking to defend his title and potentially claim his 21st Grand Slam. There was one problem. Djokovic wasn't vaccinated against the coronavirus, and Australia had strict entry requirements for unvaccinated travelers. Now, here's what a lot of people forget about this story. Djokovic didn't try and sneak in. He didn't lie. He applied for and received a medical exemption through the proper channels. Tennis Australia approved it. An independent medical review panel also approved it. So he boarded a plane to Melbourne, believing reasonably that he had followed the rules. And then he landed. Australian Border Force officials detained him at the airport. They canceled his visa on the spot, and they sent Novak Djokovic, the number 1 tennis player on earth, to the Park Hotel. You know who else was at the Park Hotel? Asylum seekers, some of whom had been detained for years. The world's greatest tennis player sleeping in the same facility as refugees, waiting to find out if he'd be deported. What happened next was a circus that played out in the public eye. Djokovic's lawyers challenged the cancellation in court, and they won. A judge ruled that border officials hadn't given him proper opportunity to respond before canceling his visa, so the cancellation was overturned. Djokovic was released. he started practicing on the tournament courts, and it looked like he would play. And then Australia's immigration minister, Alex Hawke, personally intervened and cancelled the visa using his ministerial powers. His reasoning? Djokovic's presence in Australia might, quote, be counterproductive to efforts at vaccination and could increase anti-vaccine sentiment. So let me translate that for you. The Australian government argued that because Novak Djokovic was famous and unvaccinated, his mere presence in the country was dangerous, not because of anything he had done, but because of what he represented. So what happened to Novak Djokovic was unfair prosecution driven by hysteria and political posturing. He followed the process, he got approved, and he showed up in good faith. And then the government moved the goalposts because he'd become a political symbol that they found inconvenient. The federal court's Chief Justice said it plainly. It is in no part of the function of the court to decide upon the merits or the wisdom of the decision. Translation, we're not saying this is right, but we are saying that the minister has the legal power to do it. Djokovic was deported on January 16th of 2022 and banned from Australia for 3 years. But here's part of the story that matters for you. Despite clearly believing he was being treated unfairly, Novak Djokovic complied with the lawful orders. He didn't barricade himself in his hotel, he didn't make inflammatory statements. He didn't try to become a martyr. He issued a dignified statement expressing disappointment that he respected the decision, and then he got on the plane and left. And you know what? That compliance almost certainly helped him. In late 2022, the Australian government quietly reversed its decision. The 3-year ban was waived, and Djokovic returned to the Australian Open in January of 2023 and won the whole thing. If he had fought dirty, if he had turned it into an international incident more than it already was, if he had burned bridges or made enemies of the officials involved, do you think that waiver happens? I don't. The lesson here isn't that you should let governments push you around. The lesson is strategic compliance. You don't have to like the laws, but you do have to follow them. And sometimes following them, even when they're being applied unfairly, is what preserves your options for the future. Now, let's look at one more case. This one goes back a bit further, but it illustrates something important about how the past can follow you forever. In May of 2011, Russell Brand, a British comedian, at the time married to pop star Katy Perry, decided he wanted to fly to Japan during her concert tour to surprise her, show up, watch his wife perform, a romantic gesture. But he never made it out of the airport. Japanese immigration officials detained him at Narita Airport and informed him he would be deported immediately. No appeal. The reason? Criminal convictions from more than 10 years earlier. Brand had a history of drug use and other offenses from his early life, things he had publicly discussed, addressed, and moved past. He'd gotten sober and rebuilt a successful career as well as marrying a global pop star. But Japan didn't care. Katie herself tweeted, "So my husband got deported from Japan. I am so sad. I brought him all this way to show him my favorite place. It was for priors from 10 years ago." That's the part where I tell you that celebrity doesn't give you a pass. Not at airports, not with immigration officials, not with border control computers that have records going back decades. That's why you must be judicious in your behavior at all times. I'm not here to lecture anyone on their lifestyle choices. What I am here to tell you is that the consequences of certain actions follow you across borders and across years in ways most people don't think about until it's too late. Japan has some of the strictest immigration policies in the world regarding criminal history. Any drug conviction, possession, use, anything can result in a permanent denial of entry. They don't care if it was 40 years ago. They don't care if you've won an Oscar since then. And here's the thing, Japan is not unique. Canada, yes, Canada, friendly neighborhood to the United States, Canada, bans entry to anyone who has ever been convicted of driving under the influence. DUI, one time, 30 years ago, it doesn't matter. I've had clients discover this the hard way when they try to fly to Toronto for a business meeting and get turned around at customs because of something that happened to them in college. Australia also conducts character tests that can deny entry based on criminal history. The UK regularly refuses visas to people who have committed serious criminal acts abroad. These practices are not rare, they're not unusual. They're standard operating procedure in developed countries around the world. So what's the through line here? What connects a TikTok star in Las Vegas, a tennis champion in Melbourne, and a comedian in Tokyo? They all learned the same lesson. Immigration enforcement doesn't care who you are. But here's what they also demonstrate, and this is the part I really want you to pay attention to. The outcomes were different, and the differences come down to two things: compliance and options. Djokovic complied with orders he believed were unjust, and his ban was eventually lifted. He has since won multiple Australian Opens. Brand had no options. His past was his past, and Japan's laws are Japan's laws. But Khaby had something that may have made all the difference in the world. He had an Italian passport. Now remember, Khaby Lame was born in Senegal. He moved to Italy as a 1-year-old. He grew up there, he became famous there, but for most of his life he was not an Italian citizen. He only received his Italian citizenship in 2022. It was a whole news story at the time. The most famous TikToker in the world, living in Italy since infancy, was finally being recognized as Italian. So when Khaby entered the United States, he entered on that Italian passport. Italy is part of the visa waiver program. That means streamlined entry, favorable treatment, and critically, more options if something goes wrong. So here's a question I want you to sit with. If Khaby Lame had only held his Senegalese passport, would he have been granted voluntary departure? Senegal is not part of the visa waiver program. Senegalese citizens need a visa to enter the United States at all. The bureaucratic relationship is completely different. The assumptions officials will make will be completely different. Now, I can't prove what would have happened, but I can tell you that passport privilege is real, and it matters the most exactly in these situations when something has gone wrong and you need favorable discretion. Now, I know some people hear passport privilege and think that I'm making a political statement. I'm not. Every country on earth discriminates based on nationality when it comes to immigration. Every single one of them. It's called visa policy. Americans can visit 185 countries without a visa. Afghans can visit about 27. That's not my opinion. That's just the data. When Italy says Italian passport holders can enter visa-free, and the US says we'll give them 90 days without paperwork, and other countries say, well, we're not on the list, that's a legal nationality-based discrimination that every government participates in. I'm not telling you it's fair. I'm telling you it's real, and smart people plan around it. The single most powerful thing you can do for your international mobility is acquire additional citizenships. More passports mean more options. More options mean more protections when things go sideways. So, let me bring this back to you. You might be watching this and thinking, I'm not famous. How does this apply to me? Well, actually, it applies to you even more. When Khaby Lame got detained, it made international news. He had management teams, lawyers, probably diplomatic pressure working behind the scenes. He had leverage that came with being extremely visible. You probably don't have that. I know I don't. So when you get detained at an airport, nobody's writing articles about it. There's no public pressure campaign. It's just you alone in a room with immigration officials who have enormous discretionary power over your immediate future. That's exactly why preparation matters more for regular people than it does for celebrities. Here's what I want you to take away from these stories. First, compliance is non-negotiable. Track your visa dates. Understand the terms of your entry. Don't gamble with your future mobility on, it'll probably be fine. Khaby Lame was 37 days from his entry, only 7 days over what he was likely granted. That's not an accident, that's negligence, and the consequences could have been catastrophic. Second, you don't have to like the laws, but you do have to follow them. Djokovic believed he was being persecuted, and honestly, I think he was right. But he complied anyway, he preserved his dignity, and eventually he got his access restored. Strategic compliance beats righteous defiance when you're dealing with sovereign governments. Third, your past will follow you forever. Russell Brand's decade-old mistakes cost him entry into Japan. A single DUI can cost you entry into Canada for life. Be judicious in your behavior at all times, because you never know which country's database is going to flag you 20 years from now. And fourth, and the most actionable one, your passport determines your options. Khaby's Italian citizenship might have been the difference between voluntary departure and a 10-year ban. That's not speculation, that is how these systems work. Now, if you're watching this and you've never thought about a second citizenship, now is the time to start. Many of you already qualify for citizenship through descent, through grandparents, parents, or sometimes even great-grandparents. Italian citizenship, Irish citizenship, Polish citizenship, maybe even Portuguese. These programs exist and they're accessible if you know how to navigate them. I've done complete videos on Italian citizenship by descent specifically. That's the same pathway that got Khaby Lame his EU passport. If you have Italian ancestry, you might be closer to European citizenship than you think. The link is in the description and in the card screen right now. Now, if you're serious about exploring your options, whether it's ancestry-based citizenship, residency programs, or just understanding how to protect yourself when you travel, book a consultation with Evolution Expats. We look at your family history, your goals, and map out what's actually possible for you in your situation. Because when you're the one sitting in that immigration office, you want to know what your options are before you get there. The link is in the description. Every country has the right to enforce its immigration laws. The question is, when they enforce them on you, will you be prepared? Khaby Lame got lucky. Novak Djokovic played it smart. Russell Brand learned the hard way that the past doesn't stay in the past. Which category will you be in? Remember, the right information makes it all possible. I'm Brad with Evolution Expats, and I'll see you in our next video.